Katrina, you're the one who brought up to me you wanted to scan these photos.
Yes. We have a plethora of photo albums, and I have like 10 scrapbooks that are full of finished pages with no pictures, because pictures are hard.
There's my Christina. There she is, playing with her sisters.
I lost track of where I was going. It's distracting even seeing them. Over time, I've gone over the stages of grief, but I don't believe even now that I necessarily accept her death. I needed to hold someone accountable for her death.
We all knew something bad just happened to her. This isn't natural. So we investigated, bought books, and learned as much as we could.
This is like a travesty of justice.
September 29th, 2014, it just, is that even a real day? I don't know. I think the whole day stands out. It just seems surreal.
I just think of the song, The Day the Lights Went Out in Georgia. It was like the day the lights went out. Like, the world stopped September 29th, 2014. It halted and stayed there and is still there. I feel like the earth jolted on its axis and it's just stuck. My name is Katrina Sharon, and I am the middle sister to Christina Harris.
My name is Patricia Hutchinson, and I am the youngest sister of Christina Harris.
Christina is the oldest. I am 5 years younger, and Patricia is 8 years younger than Christy. We were a rowdy group of girls. I was roughly 3 years old, and I remember finding this really long, like, lip gloss, and it was strawberry flavored. And so I asked Christy what it was, and she said to me, "Oh, you know what that's for? That's to make your feet smell like strawberries." So at 3 years old, I'm rubbing this on the bottom of my bare feet. And come to find out, that was Mom's lip gloss.
Hopefully she didn't use it after.
She did, is what I'm telling you.
Oh, gross.
Christy was just very independent, very tenacious. When she learned to ride her bike, she spent the whole day wrecking in the backyard. And by the end of the day, she could ride her bike. And of course, her knees were all scraped and dirty, but she didn't seem to care. She had accomplished her goal.
We are at one of her favorite places on earth. It's Pratt Lake, Gladwin, Michigan, at her grandparents' lake house that she spent summers when she was a child and occasionally when she was a grown-up.
When Christy met Jason, she was 21.
When they started dating, he seemed to be good with Christy. They liked similar things. They liked rock music.
I was Christy's maid of honor for her wedding. It was one of Christy's most favorite days ever, and that's because she was the center of attention. Christy's always wanted to be married, have kids, and basically have the white picket fence, that whole story.
When Christy got pregnant, she was over the moon because this was an experience that of her dreams. It was finally happening for her.
Haley was born November 1st, 2009. Callie-Ann Jay was born on May 20th, 2014.
She loved it, she was happy, and that was worth $1 million right there. Is Christy happy? Then I'm happy. On September 29th, I was at my desk at work, and I got a phone call from Jason, Christy's husband. He said, "Come to the house now," and I was in the next town over. I was concerned about finding out what was going on because I had seen her the day before and she was fine. I trusted that Christy and the kids were safe with him.
I got in the car, drove to Christy's house, pulled in, parked in front of the house. There was an ambulance in the driveway. Jason was there, looking sad. So I went into the house, and Christy was laying in the bed with a blanket over her. And it was pretty much an out-of-body experience. It's just disbelief. It's literally like you're watching a movie of yourself, and it's like, how do you react to this?
I pulled up at the curb right across from the front door, and that's where Jim came out to the passenger side door and told me that Christy was gone. I got hysterical. I said, "This isn't true." And I'm like, what is going on? What happened? Jason was telling me that she was in bed and she didn't wake up, and the neighbor had found her. Jason was explaining to me that there had been some problems, that when breastfeeding, he didn't know how many times he had gotten her a glass of water and she would say it tasted chemically. At this day and time, what is breaking in our news locally is the Flint City water crisis. And I said, "Jason, you have well water, but you have Davison City well water. You do not have Flint well water. Your water should not be tasting chemically." I said, "That doesn't make sense." I was not buying this scenario. And then it hit me, what did he do? She's healthy, she's 36. She's a breastfeeding mother. She's been going to the doctor for 9 months. And this isn't natural. This isn't natural for her not to just wake up.
How did she not wake up? It was as though I didn't know how to process that information.
My dad said, "You need to come home. It's Christy." I was in shock driving and started shaking and didn't even know what to think. And so I called my best friend.
I got a call from Katrina, and I just couldn't make out what she was saying at first. It was just Christy didn't wake up. I'm like, what do you mean? Nothing made sense.
And she's like, "How the F does that happen?" And that sentence is what got me out of my crying, emotional, and I was able to focus. And I was like, yeah, how does that happen?
I couldn't process anything in the moment that day.
I feel like when I look back on the day, we weren't just a mourning family. We were screaming that this is not right.
My mom immediately just kind of flipped a switch and was like, "Okay, we got to pursue this because this didn't happen naturally."
I could not get the medical examiner to sync up with me. I'm standing there telling him she's a breastfeeding mother. She's healthy. I seen her yesterday. She wasn't feeling bad. This makes no sense. Why would a healthy 36-year-old just not wake up in the morning? And Jason is standing there listening to these conversations and participating with this conversation with the medical examiner.
There was absolutely no doubt in my mind that this was not a natural cause.
And it was just wrong. Everything sounded wrong. So that's when we kind of all headed over to Jim and Kathy's.
We were all sitting here in the living room asking the questions, how could this happen?
I had been trying to figure out what's the cause. So I just said, what's everybody's conspiracy theory?
I said before Christy passed away, she called me one day and she said Jason was texting other women. She sent me a copy of the phone record.
He transcribed all the text messages.
I transcribed all the text messages.
I saw the length that Jason went. I mean, Christy pulled phone records and there was thousands of texts between him and these other women.
And what did the text say?
That she was worth more dead than alive.
And I said, what happens if he had done something? There was quiet.
Even knowing that the relationship was rocky, I did not go mentally to foul play like my mom had done. I was 16 years old when I met Jason. He was introduced to us as Jay. I would go hang out at Christy's house, so I was around him more often. I would go over and play games for game nights, and they would kiss 3 times, and she would always say, past, present, future. Jason was very much a part of the family.
On outward, you seen the happy family, but Christy let me know that there were issues, and I think that was the catalyst subconsciously the day she passed away for how I responded. I remember feeling something that I never comprehended. Who goes to the police? How do you go to the police?
Finally, we actually went in on October.
Well,
First.
to the police for the first time.
Yeah. We went to see the Davison City Police Department, and we said we think that there's foul play.
We were told that they couldn't do anything without the autopsy results.
The police officer told her that it could be as soon as 2 weeks or as long as 90 days before any answers would come, and that it just took time. But if we really felt that there was foul play, he said that we should start a notebook and we needed to keep track of any details that we thought of. Now, I don't necessarily believe that he realized who he was talking to.
So this was our version of what you would call a murder book. This is all of the info that we pulled together. So we've got in here the autopsy report, which came from the medical examiners. About 3 weeks in, the actual autopsy results came out. Davison City Police Department called us up and said, come in for a meeting tomorrow, and we'll discuss the autopsy results. So at 11/3, we found out the death was heroin toxicity.
We sat there blindsided with the chief and the detective.
She said the only thing it says is heroin toxicity. From that moment on, it was like, nope, I know for a fact she didn't do it. That's all I needed.
What was the police reaction to you guys sitting there saying she was murdered?
They wrote it down and gave us the impression that they were going to be moving forward with the investigation. That was the furthest thing from the truth. It's like a different planet. So we told them without a shadow of a doubt this was not something Christy would do. It was an instant, oh, hell no, this is murder.
The death certificate had been released, that it was death by heroin toxicity, and absolutely not. I still say absolutely not. That's my response to that. She's breastfeeding. There is no way our sister did that. So it only leaves one person.
I didn't want to believe that he would do something like that. I mean, we're talking about a 16-year relationship. This isn't just some new random person. So how does somebody just do that?
You don't want to think that your brother-in-law is going to murder your sister. You just don't want to mentally go there. The medical examiner said that Christy's cause of death was a self-induced overdose. And the death certificate stated accident, and it was put in a folder in a desk unworked. No one was taking responsibility, assuming it was at her own hands.
The next day, I contacted Jason because we also had 2 little girls that we needed to deal with, and one's an infant. I'd do anything to keep the girls close. Pretending with Jason is just what I had to do, because I just needed to know they were okay. I said if he wanted, we would take the baby at nights, because Christy had been breastfeeding. So the agreement was Jim and I would keep the baby during the night and bring her to daycare in the morning.
Callie spent her first year here. I'd get up in the middle of the night and feed her the bottle. The bottle with her mother's breast milk in it, by the way.
Jason brought over all of the breast milk she had in the freezer, literally like months worth of saved breast milk. Because I had been to nursing school, I always looked at the breast milk as a sample to be tested. Because it came from her body, it is evidence. That literally was the only physical evidence that we had, because we didn't have blood from her. It wasn't like hair or anything, but it was a substance from her person.
This wasn't a situation of, pump and dump and use drugs. I mean, just because of the volume we had, and we were all confident that there was no heroin in Christy's breast milk. So we just wanted to use that as proof.
We wanted to test the breast milk, but we did not have the financial means to find an exterior lab, and we wanted to make sure that if the breast milk was tested, that it was done so that it would be admissible in court. So we had told the police that we had that. They said, I'll make note of it, but they never asked for it. I ended up with insomnia. And so I would lay in bed thinking, how can this be reality? If she died of heroin, we need proof that he gave it to her. So where'd he get it? I was awake at odd hours, and so I would spend a lot of time on the computer. Technically, I do not have any investigative training, but I am very good at research, and I have no problem utilizing Google searches to the best of my ability. I knew that Jason was working at United Plastics. The president of the company worked with Narcotics Anonymous to hire his workforce to help get guys who are trying to stay clean a good job. There's a lot of addicts working at United Plastics, so I knew his work environment could have been where the drugs had come from. The president of United Plastic was aware of all the rumors and knew a list of guys who would share information. So I started researching people and who they're friends with and who their friends are friends with.
The information that came out of that series of interviews we did with coworkers was that Jason did talk to coworkers about killing her. He asked about drugs.
Jason was asking what drugs could be not tasted if put in water. The employees did not advocate that.
One of my roller derby teammates, her brother worked with Jason, and my friend tells me the rumor at work is that he killed her for life insurance money.
Now, to us, that was the green light to say this thing should really start moving. I took that to the Davison City Police Department, and the sad part is it went nowhere.
Christy's life insurance was part of her medical insurance, and she had changed her amount to be a life insurance policy of $100,000. The change was because the baby was born. Unsure who between Jason and Christy is the actual decision maker on the policy being what it was. But even after doing it, Christy believed that it was in excess. Christy had made the comment to my mom, "I am worth more dead than alive to him." We realized that the life insurance could have been the major driving forces to why Christy was deceased. I look back on the day, and I remember the viewing was on Friday. I had lines of people wanting to say, "I'm so sorry for the loss of your sister." It was very overwhelming, and I felt very a part of the community. But when heroin toxicity gets told, people didn't know. And we weren't talking about it because there's an investigation. And we're not going to jeopardize an investigation by saying my sister died of heroin toxicity, because he's obviously involved. And I don't know who all talks to who. It's a small community. We didn't want Jason to know. We knew he was involved. Jason did not seem like a grieving widow at all. He was bragging about the fact that his refrigerator was stocked full of so much food. The only way I can describe it is a manic high of, look at all the stuff I'm getting.
I recall Jason went up to one of the funeral directors and was asking about when the mail came. What specifically was delivered to the funeral home? I guess I'm not sure.
It was the life insurance payout that I believe was $20,000. They do an instant payout, so he was waiting for the check because the funeral home would take their portion and he would have the remainder.
Yeah, and I remember he was very agitated asking about when the mail was coming.
Yes. He wanted access to those funds.
Jason made me feel very uncomfortable at the funeral home. He cornered me in like the vestibule area of the funeral home when we were leaving and basically said, you know, you're gonna have to talk to me sometime, and he made me hug him. And I couldn't get out of there fast enough.
While we were doing all this investigating, there was one key thing that had to happen. Jason Harris could not know about this because Jason Harris had our two granddaughters. And we knew he was a vindictive person.
We wanted to make sure any key parts were still gathered. So we stayed very close to Jason.
Jason had no idea what was going on as far as us thinking perhaps that maybe he was involved. He couldn't have had any idea.
I know he has a very short fuse, and I was more fearful of his interactions and was afraid of what he might do to the kids or myself or any of us if he were found in an environment with us alone with him.
Kathy commented, the detective and the chief blew you off when you said that insurance money was a motive. Jason says that he wants to purchase a house a couple of streets over. And he's been on an obvious spending spree.
Jason had put a down payment on a house about a block or so away from the house Christy passed away in. And so New Year's Eve, he had called and said that if we wanted the Coca-Cola collection that my mom had given Christy was at the house and we could pick it up. So my dad and I went to the house to pick up the collection. And
when we put all these pieces together, it just seemed like there was a lot of pre-planning.
that's when I found a box in the basement. The box said, "Do not open."
Bad person. I don't know what the that is.
Have you seen this recently?
No, I haven't seen this since the night we went there.
I'm alone in the basement and I'm whispering to myself, I don't know. I'm like scared of it.
But I'm not gonna touch.
I saw white powder and that freaked me out too because it was all over the floor. The box had drug paraphernalia in it. There was stuff on it. There's tin foil.
To us, that was like the light bulb went off.
Jason was using drugs in the basement of the house that my sister was found in.
But it's information filled in the blanks that we were trying to get the authorities to use to substantiate, to move forward, or somehow get the case more active than it had been.
And the fact that the police were doing nothing kind of stymied everything. At that point, everything with Davison Police Department basically just died.
We were frustrated with the authorities. We believed that they didn't want to admit there not being an investigation done efficiently.
For us, this is not something that would go away. It's not like a year into it, we'd just go, oh, well, you know, forget about it. We couldn't do that because at the end of this, if you don't do everything that you can do, how are you going to feel?
And so I was continuing to research everyone and everything, and my mom was emailing, trying to get anyone to listen to see about getting movement.
We couldn't think for 1 minute that he was drawing a free breath and Christy was dead. It just wasn't going to happen. So you have to keep the faith. You always have to have a hope of justice. Jason would use every opportunity he could to withhold the girls. That was his way of controlling us. So the goal here was we did not let him know anything.
I heard you're kind of like the technology guru of the family.
Yes, I'm the one that gets to hook up the printers and fix the printers, and my computer's not working right and all that good stuff. Whatever the new technology is, I like to get a hold of it and see what I can do with it. So approximately 6 months after Christy died, I get a message from Jason telling me his laptop won't boot. The real thing he wanted was all the pictures off. Well, I took that as an opportunity, and I said, well, I can take a look at it. I have some devices here at home that you basically take the hard drive out and you plug in and you can see the data, as long as the hard drive's not shot. So I was able to get access to his hard drive. I don't think Jason's a smart person. You know, you've heard that saying, not the smartest tool in the shed. He's not in the shed. He never even made it to the shed. I found a web link where you'd looked up how a couple of drugs reacted with each other with regard to if you give them to someone, and just some searches that were kind of questionable. I knew Christy would not have any reason to want to look up. Those just struck me as criminal. Started moving the pictures, and that's when I found a key picture that showed him in the basement of his house on Bay Street with all kinds of drug paraphernalia in front of him. They're having a little drug party in the basement. You know, you've got the butane, you know, lighters, and you can see the drugs on a mirror. So all that did for us was anything he wanted to say about, no, I don't do that. Well, explain this picture then.
My dad took that opportunity to copy the hard drive and tell the police, I have this computer, it's his, do you want it? Police said, yes, we want it. Can you drop it off? My parents said, no, we want you to obtain it legally. You need a warrant, so get a warrant, we'll give you the laptop. At the same time, we informed the police that we had the breast milk. So they're like, well, we'll get the breast milk when we get the laptop. So in the spring 2015, they obtained a warrant to get the laptop and the breast milk. They gathered both of those items, sent them to the Michigan State Police, and we then, for the next 3 months, the Davison City Police was telling us, we haven't heard anything, we haven't heard anything.
The reality is that hard drive was a 6-month wait in purgatory, because every time I'd go to the police department, well, we're waiting on the hard drive, waiting on the hard drive.
I ended up reaching out to the Michigan State Police and saying, what happens to the evidence? Like, how long does it take to work through? I got a call from one of the head guys at the Michigan State Police saying, we don't know what you're talking about. The Michigan State Police ended up communicating with the Davison City Police, and the laptop was found, and the Davison City Police detective didn't know how to access the files in it.
You know, there are a lot of things that you can do yourself. You can't press charges against someone. You can't arrest someone. So if you're wanting the state to bring charges against someone, you can't just go out and say, I'm going to hire a prosecutor and I'm going to, go after somebody. It's totally up to their time.
The City of Davison Police Department stopped investigating because the death certificate stated accident.
You cannot expect somebody else to do it. Even if you have a top-notch police force that's just all over it, I don't think any of that means that you can just back off and let them do it. It's still something that you have to do to get the result that you're wanting at the end. That's one of the reasons why we decided to do the civil case, because as we looked into it, we realized we do control this.
We had the information of his communication with the other phone numbers up until Christy had passed. We had the search results from the laptop. We had the photograph of Jason having drug paraphernalia in front of him, and we had the video of the home showing drug paraphernalia in a box in the home that Christy was found in. We had a plethora of information, and we had the breast milk. So we filed a wrongful death suit against Jason.
Our main reason was not for the financial end of it, but to get Jason on the stand and testifying. We wanted him in front of somebody talking about the case.
We also had tried the Freedom of Information Act multiple times to no avail, and it was an avenue to get us information. We wanted to make sure there wasn't any additional evidence that was just going to end up disappearing.
I think there were people along the way that had doubt just because of the time that passed. It wasn't a matter of what evidence we collected or what information we had. It was just, okay, well, it's been 4 years. It's not going to happen if it hasn't happened already. And we just kept pushing.
With this case, civil case, we were able to push it. We were able to use subpoena power. We were able to get people in and get them to answer a line of questions that we were involved with creating. So from that point forward, we actually felt like we were making progress.
One of the depositions from a former coworker at United Plastics was that Jason hired somebody to shoot Christy and make it look like a random drive-by.
He'd asked coworkers to murder Christy. That is solicitation of murder. We listened to the deposition of Leah Miller, who's Jason's live-in girlfriend. She was saying she'd never seen Jason do drugs, and she was not aware of Jason doing drugs. And in this picture, both of them are sitting there, and it's like drug heaven.
At the end of the deposition, the medical examiner ultimately changed the status from a self-induced overdose to homicide. That felt like validation.
The civil case then goes to Jason. He has two choices. He can agree and sign it that he caused the issue, or he can say, I don't want to sign it, let's go to court, and he could get up in front of a jury. He did not do that. He signed that he was responsible for Christy's death.
So in August 2019, we got called to the state police for an update. It was in that meeting that we heard Jason Harris has been arrested and is in custody.
The three charges that he had were capital murder in the first degree, means that he planned it. Second one was a solicitation of murder. He'd asked coworkers to murder Christy. And the third was murder with a controlled substance because it was heroin that he had given her. While there was some initial relief that he had been arrested, it was brief because the other thing that pops into your head is, what about our granddaughters? Where are they?
Yeah, because if a jury said not guilty, we'd probably never see those girls again.
Yeah.
We really weren't safe when he was arrested. We needed to hear guilty.
We were at the trial. The Genesee County prosecutor said that they believed that Jason put heroin in her cereal and fed her cereal, which caused her death.
The expert testified and said that if it was in cereal, it would have been tasteless because the sugar would overcompensate the bitter taste that heroin has.
And the breast milk was evidence used by the prosecutor. Results of the breast milk came up clean. There was nothing in it.
And what that meant was we had proven Christy could not be doing drugs.
The verdict happened 7 years after her death. When the verdict was read, I had Patricia to my left, my dad to my right, my best friend directly behind me. And when they said the first guilty, I felt Trisha begin to cry. I felt my dad start shaking from tears, and my best friend hit me on the back, and with every single guilty, she was hitting me.
The verdict was guilty on all counts, which was very emotional. Jason Harris was sentenced to life in prison without parole. So that means he will die in the penitentiary.
It was validating. It was a rough rush of emotions. The judge said everything we'd thought and felt over the past 7 years, he got it. It was finally, after 7 years, somebody got it. I feel like justice was served.
There was always hope for justice. We never stopped investigating because the four of us, we have girls that need to be taken care of. And that is at the forefront. If I could say anything to Christy, I don't know if I would say anything. I'd probably just want to sit and watch a movie. Just be in the present. Because it's not like I have to tell her I love her, because I know she knew it.
Christy was a mother to me at times, as much as she was her sisters, as much as she was her children, and she lived to be the mother of her children, her own children, her babies.
The biggest thing that I want to say to her is how proud I was of her as a mother, how proud I was to be her dad. I miss her. I think about her all the time.
There were 4 victims put in barrels out here in the woods.
On the next episode of True Crime Stories Citizen Detective.
These little girls and their mother were just nameless. Why is nobody looking for them? I started searching anything that might lead to the identity of the victims. I'm like, oh my God.
True Crime Story Citizen Detective.
I think of Ronnie every day. This was him taken the day his son was born. He was 24 years old. I see things that remind me of him. I see his picture. I find pennies on the road, and I say, oh, Ronnie was here because he used to give me all his pennies. So, I mean, I will dive under a table for a penny if I think it's... And
she would get hit by a car trying to get a damn penny.
And because it's a penny from heaven.
Yeah, it's not a penny from heaven.
And I know that sounds crazy, and people might look at me like it's crazy, but it's my healing. He's with me all the time. I know I lost my son, but never once would anyone come forward and tell the truth. It had to be drug out of them. We had to connect the dots. Are those koi still alive? Or
Yeah,
are they...
well, I don't know about the alive part, but this summer I'm going to build a cover for this that is raccoon-proof.
My name is Judy Weaver. I'm from Orlando, Florida. Nowadays, it's amusement parks, but we were here before Disney when it was really nice. And it was very quaint, quiet. Neighbors helped neighbors. We took walks and fed the ducks, and I like cars. So I taught the kids how to change a tire, how to change the oil, and just everything.
My mom, Judy, is tenacious, that's for sure. She is like a dog with a bone at times, and I think I got that straight from her. I'm Deborah Murray. I'm the oldest, and then Ronnie was under me about 5.5 years. And then our sister was about 11 years younger than me.
They were total opposite as far as the energy went. Tammy was very loving and affectionate. Debbie could get a book and sit and read for hours, and Ronnie had to tear up things.
You know, you walk in a room and he'd have a fan pulled completely apart. He was always curious about how things worked. So I didn't want him using my things. So I ran him off a lot.
He was a handful, but he was a joy. He always wanted to be the peacemaker. He never wanted to disappoint. He always wanted me to be proud of him. Back in 2005, Ronnie ended up coming to live with me. He started having trouble with his personal life. He became an addict, and he was ashamed of what he was doing.
He was battling drugs. Ronnie had interactions with people living in that community that were dealing in drugs. A not so great situation.
On June 27th, Ronnie wanted to go to the store to get a pack of cigarettes. His car was in front of my car, so he used his bicycle to go down to the store. It had started raining. I didn't want him to leave. I could feel something wasn't going to go right. And he said, "Oh, Mom, don't get paranoid." He says, "I'll be back in 10 minutes. He kissed me on my left cheek and told me he loved me, and I'll always remember that that's what I heard out of his mouth. I think most people aren't blessed to have that when they lose their loved ones. 10, 15 minutes later, I was in the shower and I heard my daughter Tammy come home from work. She came and said there's sirens pretty close to the house, and I jumped out of the shower and called Ronnie. He didn't answer the phone. Got in the van and went looking for him.
I was home getting ready for bed, and my mom called and said there had been an accident, and she was on the scene.
I found all the commotion where the police department was and where the fire department was, and you seen the paramedics all out and the people standing around. They were some of the shady people in the neighborhood. I could see them whispering things. It was like a nightmare. I pulled in and an old man says, "It's a young man down the road." And he looked at me and he says, "Oh, it's your son." It's Ronnie. The paramedics were trying to hook him up on the stretcher and everything. And that's when I found him.
When my mom came upon the scene, it was just like something you wish you could unsee. There was blood all over the place, and Ronnie was in an unconscious state. We were being fed a little bit of information here and there from some of the people watching. What they said happened that night was that Ronnie just simply fell off a bike and hit his head on a curb.
This is where Ronnie was supposed to have been hurt. As you can see, still,
Yeah.
there are no curbs.
Yeah,
So
there's still no curbs.
there's still no curbs here.
no curbs up there. They don't exist.
Everything was telling me this isn't right. Something's not right. I started observing everything. Well, he fell on a bike that's not there. Where's the bike? Where did he fall? He hit a curb. There's no curb. Where did he hit the curb? When they're getting Ronnie on the stretcher, I'm seeing him now. His pockets are inside out. And they said there was nothing else. He had nothing else on him. I know he had a wallet when he left. I know he had money when he left. I wanted to know how, if he hit a curb, fell off his bike, how did the pockets come inside out of his pants? Nobody had an answer for that. I saw one police officer in a car. He did not come out, take names, didn't bring a clipboard out and ask any questions. He was just sitting there. It was raining. He didn't want to get wet. EMTs told me his name was Spike. I said, my God, who on earth would name their name Spike? I never got to talk to him because he left. But my concern was to be with my son. We would find out the answers later.
When we arrived to the hospital, I asked that we be able to see Ronnie. We went back into trauma to see him. That was awful, and I wish I could take that away. There was severe brain trauma. There was brain swelling. And the doctor that was going to be doing his brain surgery was explaining the two areas of injury to his head, a temporal lobe injury and an injury to the back of the head. Made you wonder how in the world he hit his head twice, falling off the bicycle one time. So it's still not making any sense.
I called the police. I asked them, why has no one come to check on my son? I have questions and I want answers for, and nobody's willing to come. Well, the officer said he took the report. He's seen it only as an accident. You know, there was no foul play, just a bicycle accident, and that was it. No investigating needed. Even though their story was he had fallen on his bike, the bike had disappeared. I threatened to call and have it reported as stolen. Shortly after that, the bike did appear.
At some point, someone had brought the bike up to her front porch. Somebody rolled up in the middle of the night when we were asleep.
As you can see, there are no scratches on the bike. I've never washed it or anything, just put air in the tire.
There was no damage to the bicycle at all.
Nothing had happened on that bicycle. Everything was like it was when Ronnie rode off on it. That was my first evidence that something else had happened. He was not on this bike when he got hurt. It was not the cause of his death. Oh, well, sorry it happened, but it was just an accident. You know, that's what I was getting. No one was going to help us. I couldn't buy into that. It was up to us to go investigate it. You're not going to take me out of the equation.
It doesn't appear there was any type of investigation done at the scene. There were no police sent or dispatched to the hospital. It was just determined very quickly it was a bicycle fall. And that may have been misconstrued because the sheet I actually got a copy of shows motorcycle accident. When the police arrived, there was no motorcycle and there was no bike. Whatever it was minutes that it was looked into. We could just drive by there.
I started going that way then because I wanted to see who was around and who wasn't. This is the main house here where my son was hurt.
We spoke to many people.
We found out the place was a drug house that sold everything.
Then we were realizing some of the people that were witnesses that evening lived there, and the police took the word for what they said happened that night and left it alone. And I filed a complaint with the Orange County Sheriff's Department at that point and received phone calls regarding my complaint letter. It was a detective, and he said Ronnie was at a house that was well known for drugs. So he might not have been an innocent victim in this. And there were far more imperative cases than Ronnie's to check into.
There shouldn't be a line drawn because you're this or you're that. That's not acceptable. There's loved ones that care for those people. Anyone that gets hurt, there's somebody that loves them and they want the right thing done for them, just like they would for anyone else. I knew Ronnie was unconscious and he may not make it, So I need to find out from the streets what's being told. When the police brush you off, they brush you off at the scene and they brush you off on the phone, then yeah, you take it to the streets because the streets are the ones that have the answers.
She would talk to everybody, but it was never different than the falling off the bike story. You have an entire duplex community that potentially saw what happened, but they weren't open to sharing that information. Felt like they were hiding from something that happened. Just didn't make a lot of sense.
They said that Ronnie was horsing around with the bike and he popped a wheelie and hit the curb and the curb threw him down on the ground. He did used to do that when he was a teenager, but not as a grown man. And the only reason he rode the bike, it was to get to the store and back. He didn't go in the rainstorm with a bike to pop a wheelie.
During the time that Ronnie was on life support, we would visit the hospital daily. It was primarily just spent talking to doctors, trying to find out the prognosis. There was discussions on what they could expect would happen with Ronnie.
He wasn't getting better. The fever wasn't going away in the brain and it kept killing cells. I said, well, will he ever recognize me? No. Will he know who he is? No. Everything was no, no, no.
He was never going to move again. He was never going to have a thought. There was no brain left. So at this point, you have to make a decision. Move him to long-term care or take his life support away.
How do you end someone's life that you love so much? But how do you look at somebody that you know was so full of life? Just lay there and they're at everyone's mercy. How do you do that? It's not easy. I could feel Ronnie begging me to let him go. I could feel him. And I know that I don't want that for myself, and I did not want that for my child. They did all the preparation they needed to do, and when he passed, he died the minute that he was born. It was 8 o'clock, same time, in the same hospital.
When the death certificate was issued, it was listed as an accidental death. I really felt disappointed that this was it, that this was all we were going to get. The ball was dropped the night it happened. The ball was dropped when it went to the detective, and it just kept on bouncing a few more times after that. It needs to be made right.
I needed to know what happened to my child. I needed to know for myself. I needed to get as much information as I could. And so Debbie and I decided we'll just tell the neighbors that Ronnie is alive and he's talking. He's going to a rehab, and then they're going to send him home.
The people living in that duplex community did not know that he never woke up. They thought Ronnie was talking, and Ronnie was telling a story, and it's not the story y'all are telling, it's a different story. She was stirring the pot, pressing them for the truth.
The next day, there was a girl riding down the road, and she was asking me, how's your son doing? And I recognized her from that night. I said, well, he's got a big headache. I said, but he's sitting up telling a different story. He said it didn't go down like that. He never fell on his bike. She said, oh, and that was it. Next thing I know, I seen somebody walking toward my house. You could tell from his eyes, this guy wasn't right. The man that showed up at my doorstep introduced himself. He said he goes by Jay. I didn't believe what his name was because he seemed like he was fishing for what I knew. He thought Ronnie was up and telling his story.
We didn't really know how he fit into this. We didn't know his angle. It just seemed like he was feeding information to distance himself from his involvement in what happened.
He said that Ronnie had a disagreement with another person over some money he owed him, and so he punched him.
Jay introduced the whole he got hit part, which was different than the falling off the bike story. It went from Papa Willie's to, being hit. So it had already changed.
No, I didn't believe anything he said. I just told him, well, there was an investigation going, and he got real quiet, and then he was wanting us to see that he had his concealed weapon permit. He pulled it out of his wallet, and he addressed me with it.
We didn't know why. We didn't know to take it as a threat. Is it intimidation? We didn't know.
I stood there and I said, well, I'm not going to shut up until I find out what happened to my son. And then he left.
We were just very confused. Now there's an extra layer. This man we don't know came to the house, possibly carrying a weapon. You have to kind of be a little careful because we don't know his role. We don't know him. We didn't know his legal name, but we knew his nickname was Jay. So I did a search on the Orange County Clerk of the Courts. You could look for evictions or criminal record, even as so much as a traffic citation. You would find record. You could see where their address was at the time that happened. I found an eviction that was issued to that address where Ronnie was hurt. I had looked up a couple of the names on social media, and I found pictures of Jay. Then I found his girlfriend's details from that. I managed to get his first name. It ended up being that his name was Jason.
Debbie discovered that his girlfriend's daughter went to the school down the street. I asked around. One of the people told me that it was Jason Gailey, and he lived in that neighborhood where Ronnie got hurt.
That's probably the difference in our dynamics. Let's see. I was more the computer and paper trail gal, and my mom, she would talk more and be able to glean more information from talking to people.
I ended up talking to the guy that was Jason's mailman, trying to find out what information they could.
Apparently, Jason's the drug boss in the duplex. He has a license to carry a concealed weapon, and he has a little bit of attitude. He was known for it, plain and simple.
These are Debbie's notes. She's more organized than me. This is his medical examiner. This is the original death certificate. And at this point it said the manner of death was accident. I finally got a hold of someone at the coroner's department, and I asked, could they please go back through the report and go back through his injuries that they found on him and see if there was anything that could say he fell off a bike and hit his head. And they said there was no way humanly possible that the injuries that he had sustained to his head could come from falling off a 24-inch bike when you were 5'10". And it was something that had been inflicted on him. And about 6 months after all this, there is in here another death certificate for a homicide, where it was changed to homicide because of their findings in their autopsy. Let's see what else is in here. Someone drew a picture of Uncle Ronnie, one of Deb's kids, I'm sure, and drew a halo over the top of his head.
We worked really hard to change Ronnie's death certificate. Every day you're faced with things you've never dealt with and didn't think you would ever have to deal with. But this was validation for Ronnie. He was a victim of a homicide and he had the right to have that known. At this point, they needed to hand this back to the detective in charge and they needed to do their job. Well, nothing really happened. So I requested a copy of the 911 tape from the night of Ronnie's accident. We didn't know who made the call, but we knew at that time that it was somebody in the duplex community. If whoever it was that called 911 actually saw what happened, we needed to meet that person.
I was coming home, so I figured, let me go down there and look around. There used to be a big dumpster like between all these buildings when they were apartments. And I saw the supervisor that takes care of the land here, and I recognized him. So I started asking him questions. He was telling me that there was eyes and ears and that I needed to stay home where I was safer, and that he didn't know how safe I would be, asking the wrong people the wrong questions. That maintenance man, he knew a lot of the inside scoop on the drug dealer, Jason, AKA Jay, because he had to go into the apartments and repair things. He saw that Jason had cameras right there between the alley and the duplex. Jason used to video everybody. That's how he did his drug dealing. He would know who pulled in that driveway. Didn't stop us still. We still came and got pictures. When it cooled off some, they'd all be sitting on the walls of these two houses.
There would be a lot of activity outside of the duplex, and I think once or twice they even yelled at her because she was driving by snapping pictures out of her car window.
Did I do things that put my life in danger? Yes. But I wanted to find out the truth, and how are you going to find out? If they don't come to you, you got to go to them. Eventually, the maintenance guy connected me with the name of the 911 caller, a guy named Mike. Mike had told him about the phone call. His story was that Jason hit Ronnie during a fight. When Ronnie got hurt, Jason took him inside the apartment and they laid him in the living room on the floor. And they were cleaning him up. They weren't going to even call the police. They weren't going to call anybody. Jason threatened them, all of them. They were forbidden to call 911. But after Mike realized the seriousness of Ronnie's injuries, he felt bad. Mike went to a payphone that was on the back side of the duplexes, away from the cameras, and made the phone call from a payphone.
Mike did ride the bike to the payphone to make the call. That's why there was no bike when the police showed up. So that we could finally understand. Mike said that the emergency response team actually found Ronnie inside the duplex. He had been moved to a sofa. When the paramedics came, he was moved back out. They never asked why. Ronnie was inside the duplex. When the police arrived, if someone had actually investigated that night, that whole bicycle story would have been blown out of the water. But no one did.
I called the state attorney's office and told him we had witness statements that could link Jason to what happened to my son. And they're saying, wrong line, and they try to bluff it out. So I was telling Debbie I can't get anywhere because I'm considered a distraught mom. I'm crazy. I don't know what I'm talking about. Debbie kept all the information together. She figured, well, one day we'll get someone that'll hear us.
I had faxed information to the detective so that he could go further. Kind of just mapped out the evidence we had and documented it into letter form. My mom and I provided him with a picture of Jason. And we told him that this was the person that we thought hit Ronnie. We gave him names and contact information for the witnesses my mom spoke to. We would see what information he would be able to get. Being a law enforcement official, I figured he'd be better at it than us. 6 months later, I asked had they spoke to the individual that we believed hit Ronnie. There had never been any contact with him made at all.
And he never followed up?
No, still no one had ever spoke to him. Still. We reached a dead end. We don't know how to, what's the expression, can't fight City Hall? We didn't know what else to do.
It had been 7 years since my son's death. The police weren't doing anything. It was a closed deal, and that was it. I was working in a restaurant, and this police officer came in. And of course, I didn't know who he was.
The night I met Judy Weaver, I decided to grab some food real quick. When I was there eating my dinner, one of the employees, who turned out to be Judy, walked by, and we struck up a conversation.
He says, how are you tonight? And I says, I'm good. I said, how are you? And he says, oh, it's quiet. He says, never anything happening on a Monday night. Or I said, well, a lot of things happen on a Monday night. My son was killed on a Monday night in the pouring down rain. I said, so don't tell me nothing happens in Orlando on a Monday night.
She started speaking about the case to me, and while I was talking to her, she explained to me about the displeasure of a sergeant by the name of Spike Hopkins who did nothing about the case.
I was telling him the investigating officer was somebody with a dog's name, and his name was Spike, and who on earth would name their kid Spike? I was going on cutting down the police officer and how sorry he was and how I wish he could live through the years I had lived and know what I felt. I wasn't nice, but I was honest.
When you told me your story and how bad this Sergeant Spike was, my heart dropped. I remember sitting there thinking, oh, she obviously hasn't seen my name tag. Could I have walked out of there and said, I'm sorry to hear about your circumstances and you'd never known it was me? Yeah.
I didn't know who you were. You could have been anybody.
Right, I could have, but after hearing you're a mother who lost her son, there is no way I could walk out on you after that.
I went off on the guy, and he said to me, well, as you were talking to me, things started ringing a bell. And he pushed his chair back, and he says, let me formally introduce myself. I was the investigating officer, AKA Spike. I was shot, number one. I talk very badly of you.
Right. Rightly so.
I never had a kind word to say about you at all.
Right.
I hated what you represented, And
I can't blame you one bit.
Yeah.
I can't blame you one bit. I just felt so bad for the woman, especially because I dropped the ball the night of the event. And then law enforcement and nobody else would do anything to help her. I wanted to get to the bottom of this. I went into the parking lot where my police vehicle was parked, and I was going to do everything I could within my power to make sure that this mom got justice for her son. I got on the computer and wrote an email to our cold case detectives to have them reopen the case so we truly could do the right thing.
After that, out of guilt or compassion, Spike became my friend. He started coming over and checking on me. Did I need anything? And he handpicked these two detectives to do the cold case. They were both remarkable. Couldn't have picked any two better detectives to have done that.
They really beat it into the ground. They went back and talked to everybody. These guys even collected some things that I had that they could not find in the original case file. They worked this hard.
Based on the research and the investigation that Judy and her daughter were able to do, the cold case detectives, got the witnesses identified, the suspect identified, and they actually flew out to track down some of the witnesses from that night in other states around the country. Going out and speaking to the eyewitnesses of this, they were able to actually get the motive and how the crime occurred. And their information corroborated what Judy found out. Ronnie was actually struck on the head and did not fall off of a bicycle.
The witnesses were very upfront with the cold case detectives. I think some of them truly wanted my mom to have some form of closure. There were details that came out we didn't know about.
The night that my son was killed, Jason was pistol whipping an older man in that driveway over something, over $10 or something, they said. Ronnie was riding his bike and he intervened. Ronnie said to Jason, "Why don't you pick on someone closer to your age?" And he went after my son with the butt of a gun.
That's what hit the side of Ronnie's head, was that gun, which was impact 1. Impact 2 was when he lost consciousness, was immediately paralyzed on his left side and fell backwards and smacked his head on the concrete.
After they got all the information and everything together and all the witnesses, I figured they had enough cause to arrest Jason. But the detectives wanted to get someone on tape.
I think at that point they were worried Jason would claim it was an accidental hitting of, because of the dispute between he and the other man. So they asked how I would feel about wearing a recording device and go down and speak with the witness to see if he would say anything incriminating. So I agreed to that, and they hid across the street in a car so they could watch, and I approached and chatted with him. It's kind of a silly lead-in to, but I had to ask him, what happened that night? What really happened that night? And I was a bundle of nerves.
You never know. You're dealing with people that are shady. I was scared for her. I don't want anything to happen to her, too. Debbie, when I was speaking with Spike yesterday, he did not know you wore the wire.
Well, why would he? They would have no reason to keep him totally
Well,
abreast.
because they were keeping him updated, but he thought that was kind of fascinating that you were brave enough to wear a wire.
I wasn't afraid. I could have taken him.
What did he say?
I'm not sure what he said because I was a wreck, but I asked the detectives to tell me what he said. It had came out that Jason had gotten in his hand, he had taken it back to his apartment, he'd asked his girlfriend to hide the gun, that he'd threatened all of them if they told him what happened. I think that was why the cold case detectives decided to proceed with charges. You had a weapon in your hand that you took the time to hide. I don't think there was a lot of accident involved in that.
Jason Brian Gailey is charged with second-degree murder because Judy Weaver just wouldn't let it go.
It's not normal for family members to conduct their own investigation, but they were instrumental in giving us enough probable cause to arrest the suspect. If they weren't beating the streets and talking to the people, we would never be here today, and the person who was arrested would have never been arrested.
Based on the new information, Jason Gailey is picked up and charged with murder, and a mother's intuition made it happen.
By the next day, it went on the news. It was on every channel. There was people lined up out there trying with cameras facing my house. I opened my front door and shut it in a hurry. And I called Debbie and I said, my God, that's what we should have done first, was gone to the media. And we wouldn't have had to wait 7 years for them to start an investigation.
After Jason was arrested, he was charged with second-degree murder. And then there was a time frame in which the state attorney has to decide to proceed with charges.
I was able to talk to the detectives several times, and they kept me up to date. I was excited that we could provide Judy and her daughter and Ronnie some justice. Only to have the state attorney drop the charges, this person was going to walk free.
The state attorneys were not confident that the jury would see these witnesses having clear mind and being able to remember details all that well, because so much time had went by.
On the TV, it actually showed Jason, and he just had a smirk on his face. He never said anything. I don't know what their intention was when they let him out, but it didn't matter. He was done anyway. He overdosed and died within about a week after he got out of jail.
Breakfast is ready.
Katie, do you want some bacon?
You guys want to come grab a plate, get some breakfast?
Take that, go sit down.
He might be enjoying my plate if he can lean forward.
Yeah.
Careful, he's quick.
That's funny.
The job had been done, belated, but it had been done. And we knew what had happened. I knew Ronnie had done a good thing in the end. He had tried to help somebody, and Ronnie's buried, he's gone. He did not die for no reason, but we have to continue to live. There's no way, you can't close it.
There's never going to be a closure.
You can know he's at peace. He's been at peace since, I believe he's been at peace since the day he died. When you let him go, he could go in peace.
You know, I'm just grateful that you were there with me during that time. I think he gave me some strength. I think Ronnie's proud of what we've done on his behalf. Looking at it, I think it made us stronger.
Yeah, I know.
I believe it made us closer. You know, we were fighting for the same thing. We were fighting for justice, for the truth. That's a bond that will never break, and you're going to get justice where justice is deserved. Just have to have faith.